I'm Ted Price. I'm founder and CEO of Insomniac Games, and we're here showing off Fuse.
This is Masoud with Dualshockers, and you're watching Dualshockers TV. We're talking about Fuse, and tell us what drove you to create this game. After the Ratchet and Clank series and everything, what brought you to Fuse?
Well, we love making new worlds. We love making new games, new IP, and we saw an opportunity to do 4-player co-op better than, or more differently than what was on the market a few years ago when we started. And so what we did was, first and foremost, we said, this is a game that's got to be fun for 1 player, 2 player, 3 players, or 4 players. And we just went from there. We started adding exotic weapons. We started coming up with a story that was otherworldly and very kind of Insomniac-ish, involving alien substances, the kind of stuff that we love. And then it just evolved from there. And since the beginning, a few years ago, we've continued to add features that help set it apart from other shooters.
Now, what from your past has, given you the creative drive to create these new weapons? And I noticed that these weapons were 4 particular weapons, whereas most of the Ratchet and Clank you had a whole load of weapons to choose from. So what made you choose just 4?
That's a great question. There were a couple things that drove us to focus on 4 in particular. One was the knowledge that we would create a progression system which allows you to unlock new abilities for each of the weapons in the game, which creates this sort of multifaceted approach, instead of throwing a whole bunch of different weapons at the player. But I'd say the biggest motivator was making sure that we'd have 4 weapons that were well balanced. It's easy to throw a whole bunch of crazy weapons at players and not really worry about balance, but with a 4-player cooperative game where you have 4 humans playing together, you've got to come up with weapons that feel good when they're combined, right? Because you don't want one weapon that stands out as being the go-to for everybody. At the same time, we wanted weapons that were non-standard, weapons that you just won't find in any other game, so that compounded the problem. So we spent a lot of time trying to come up with 4 unique weapons that worked well together, but that were ultimately well balanced and had a deep progression system behind them.
Yeah, I noticed that a lot of the classes, if I have to give each character a class, each class had a different take on it. You have your tank character who also has, a shield for protecting.
Right.
You have your sniper who can set up traps. I found that kind of interesting. What kind of progression are we going to see like that, later on in the game?
Well, so first you talk about the archetypes, right? So we definitely wanted to have a game where the 4 characters were distinct, not just through the weapons, but through their personalities. And so we have a story that unveils their background and helps develop their personalities as you're moving through. These are not 4 clones, but at the same time, that's enhanced by their weapons, all of which are start relatively simple, but then become more complex as you earn more experience and unlock new skills for each of the characters.
Right, can you tell us about the leap system?
Yeah, Leap is one of the new features that we have introduced to the game that we don't believe exists in other modern shooters right now. Now, you've probably played first-person shooters or third-person shooters or RPGs where you have a choice of multiple characters at the beginning, right? And at least from my experience, once you make that choice,
you're stuck.
That's your guy or your girl. So we actually started that way, and we realized very early on that it wasn't as much fun as if you got to switch at any time. And the interesting thing was there was a lot of internal dissension at Insomniac. We had a lot of discussions about this, and there was a lot of debate, which like most of our big design decisions. But then we tried it out and realized that the freedom to move back and forth between 4 very different players was not only entertaining, right? It gives you 4 different perspectives on gameplay, but it was also strategically useful because these weapons are so well differentiated from each other. It's really cool to be able to walk into a setup and go, you know what? I don't want to be a tank. This isn't the right place. I want to be a long-distance damage dealer. Or, hey, I need to be a healer because I know my buddies are going to be going down in this particular setup. So we let players experiment with the different types of, with different approaches by being able to leap back and forth between characters. Okay. And the last thing I'll say about that is it works whether you're playing by yourself, with 1 friend, or 2 friends. As long as there's a bot or more in the game, you can leap.
Now, if more than 1 person wanted to, switch characters, is there a smooth way to do that?
Well, as long as there's 1 bot, you can jump, you can leap.
Right.
And then it becomes a sort of a who gets there first, right? if, for example, you and I are playing and with a friend, and Izzy one of our characters is available, and we both want to go to Izzy, well, whoever hit the back button first and brought up the radial menu wins. But then the thing is, as soon as if you choose Izzy, as soon as you've leaped out of your character, then now your character is available for me to leap into.
Right.
So it becomes a game of musical chairs, and it really keeps things fresh.
Now, I noticed in the backstory that the enemies have fuse too, and they're trying to use it to make bigger weapons. What kind of enemy types or weapons are we going to be seeing, and how dangerous is fuse?
Yeah, that's the first time anybody's brought that up, I think. So that's actually good. You did. The enemies will steal fuse, the source of fuse, at the very beginning of the game, and they begin using it in their weapons and with their enemies. It becomes very dangerous. And as a matter of fact, you really have to pay attention to what weapons the enemies are using, because when you're, for example, going up against somebody who has a mag shield, you're going to have trouble.
So you're going to see some of your weapons with the enemy types as well?
Yeah, similar technology used for the enemies. Okay. The weapons that you pick up are unique. They're manufactured in a government facility. They're prototypes. But then when it's stolen by one of the enemy factions in the game, they put their own twist on the weapons. But they are using fuse, and thus the weapons are more dangerous.
Right. All right, last two questions. I was just wondering, what made you guys decide to go with this kind of more, at least serious-looking game compared to the Ratchet & Clank series? And also, do you see this becoming a new series? You know, 'cause I noticed Ratchet & Clank has been around for forever, you know, at least to me. And, you know, is this something else that's going to be a new, long-lasting series that we can just keep jumping into?
So to answer your first question, this game has continued to evolve as we have moved forward, but one thing that has remained consistent is that it doesn't take itself completely seriously. Right. There is humor throughout the game. Our characters are definitely providing some light-hearted moments throughout the game, both in the story moments and in just the emergent dialogue that comes out. Okay. And that was important to us. It helps us flesh out who the characters are and allows us as players to identify with them a little bit better than, say, a really grim, dark, self-absorbed character. Yes, it's not who we were going for. The game also, in terms of visuals, has continued to evolve. It's if you look at it now versus what it was 6 months ago, it's changed, where it's much more colorful than it was a few months ago, 6 months ago, and continues to improve based on fan feedback that we've gotten. But as far as where we're going with this IP, every IP that we've created, our goal has been to create a franchise. And one of the things we love to do is come up with very fictional worlds, and really draw on all of our science fiction influences and come up with things that just aren't plausible in today's world, and things you won't see in a military sim because it gives us more options. I mean, more things that we can do with crazy weapons or story elements that make no sense whatsoever in a modern shooter or modern military shooter. And we just have fun. We love to have fun and then make sure that gamers enjoy it with us.
All right, thank you very much, and you've been watching Dualshockers.